Everybody, it is the Macabre Tavern. We are wrapping up Universal Monsters Month on Monochrome Monday, and the Bride of Frankenstein is what we're going to be talking about this week. It is the 1935 sequel to Frankenstein. Who knew, right? No, I'm kidding. Of course, Boris Karloff is back in this movie, as well as Colin Clive, both reprising their roles from the 1931 flick. Ella Lancaster did the dual role of Mary Shelley, and the bride also in this movie was Ernest Thesiger. And Oliver Peters Heggie will play the role of the old blind hermit. Alright, so in the castle, on a stormy night, Percy Bysshe Shelley and Lord Byron praise Mary Shelley for her story of Frankenstein and his monster. She reminds him that her intention for writing the novel was basically to impart a moral lesson. The consequences of a mortal man who tries to play God. Mary says that she has more story to tell. The scene shifts from the close of the 1931 Frankenstein movie, and that's where we begin, as the villagers gathered around the burning windmill to cheer what they thought was the death of the monster. Hans, the father of the girl who the creature accidentally drowned, wants to see the monster's bones. He falls into a flooded pit underneath the mill, where the monster, having survived the fire, strangles him. Hauling himself from the pit, the monster casts Hans's wife to her death. He next encounters Frankenstein's servant Minnie, who flees in terror. The body of Henry Frankenstein, who is thought to have died in the windmill, is returned to his fiancée Elizabeth at his castle home. Minnie arrives to sound the alarm about the monster, but of course, nobody listens. Elizabeth, seeing Henry moved, realizes that he is still alive. Nursed back to health by Elizabeth, Henry has renounced his creation, but still believes he is destined to unlock the secret of life and immortality. A hysterical Elizabeth cries that she foresees his death. Henry visits the lab in his former mentor, where Pretorius shows Henry several creatures that he has tried to create. Pretorius wishes to work with Henry to create a mate for the monster, with the proposed venture involving Pretorius growing an artificial brain, where Henry gathers parts for the mate. The monster saves a young shepherdess from drowning. Her screams upon seeing the monster alerts two hunters who shoot and injure him. The hunters raise a mob that sets out into pursuit. Captured and trussed to a pole, the monster is hauled into a dungeon and chained. Left alone, he breaks the chains, overpowers the guards, and escapes into the woods. That night, the monster encounters an old blind hermit who thanks God for sending him a friend. He teaches the monster words like friend and good, and shares a meal with him. Two lost hunters stumble upon the cottage and recognize the monster. He attacks them and accidentally burns down the cottage as the hunters lead the hermit away. Taking refuge from another angry mob in a crypt, the monster spies Pretorius and his cronies Carl and Ludwig trying to break open a grave. The henchmen depart as Pretorius has supper. The monster reveals himself, eats some of his food, and learns that Pretorius plans to create a mate for him. Henry and Elizabeth, who are now married, are visited by Pretorius. Henry expresses his refusal to assist Pretorius, who calls the monster. The monster demands Henry's help to no avail. Pretorius orders the monster out, secretly signaling him to kidnap Elizabeth. Pretorius guarantees her safe return upon Henry's participation. Henry returns to the Tower Laboratory and, despite himself, grows excited over his work. After being assured of Elizabeth's safety, Henry completes the bride's body. A storm rages as final preparations are made to bring the bride to life. Her bandage-wrapped body is raised through the roof, where electricity is harnessed from lightning to animate her. Henry and Pretorius lower her, realizing their success in bringing her to life, removing the bandages, and helping her to stand. The monster comes down the steps after killing Carl on the rooftop and sees his mate. The monster reaches out to her and asks, "Friend?" The bride, screaming, rejects him. He observes, "She hates me like the others." As Elizabeth races to Henry's side, the monster rampages throughout the lab. Before destroying everything, the monster pauses and tells Henry and Elizabeth, "Go. You live. Go." To the Pistorius and the bride, he says, "You stay. We belong dead." While Henry and Elizabeth flee, the bride hisses at the monster. Shedding a tear, the monster pulls the lever to trigger the laboratory and the tower's destruction. Of course, going through the list of the who's who in this movie, Boris Karloff is the monster once again. Of course, we said Colin Clive is Frankenstein. Valerie Hobson is Elizabeth Frankenstein. Now, interesting, Mae Clark was supposed to be the original one here. Ernest Thesiger was Dr. Pistorius. Ella Lancaster became the monster's mate. And, of course, she ended up playing Mary Shelley in the beginning of the movie. Gavin Gordon was Lord Byron. Douglas Walton was Percy Shelley. Una O'Connor was Minnie. E. Clive as a burgomaster. Lucian Percival, or Privel, I should say, is Frankenstein's butler. And we can keep going down the list. This, again, it's one of the best movies ever made. Of course, the Hays Code came into effect here. It's one of the movies that was really harshly subjected to censorship. Both Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein were done during the Hays Code. And following its release by local and national censorship boards, Joseph Breen, who was the lead censor for the Hays office at the time, objected to lines in the dialogue originally submitted, a script in which Henry Frankenstein and his work were compared to that of God. Of course, we all talked about that. He continued to object to such dialogue and revised scripts and to a planned shot of the monster rushing through a graveyard to a figure of a crucified Jesus and attempting to rescue the figure from a cross. Breen also objected to the murders being put in there. Again, it took a lot to get this movie done. Universal actually pulled the movie from Sweden. Matter of fact, it was banned in Trinidad, Palestine, and Hungary. Additionally, Japanese censors objected to a scene in which Pistorius chases his miniature Henry the Eighth with tweezers, asserting that it could, make a fool out of a king. So, again, it took a lot to get this through. Of course, again, there's always been queer subtext in Frankenstein. And the truth of the matter is, Pistorius actually thought Frankenstein was gay. So, again, this is another one of those wonderful old queer horror movies that you need to watch. Yeah, if you didn't know, it's queer coded. Frankenstein has always been queer coded, and we've always looked at it through that lens. Really, a lot of us, who are queer horror fans, we've always looked at it through that lens. But again, you make your own interpretations of this. It could just be a lost person that just wanted to, have friends or something. You always look at it from that angle too. All right, that's going to do it for December. We're back in January. I will probably have made the announcement by then of what January's theme will be for Monochrome Monday. We'll see you in 2025.